It's a new year, and what better way to discuss a new year's arrival than to talk about intro... Wait a second. Crap, we already did that. Well, why not talk about the prospects of the new year by discussing music that shows the prospects of the entire world? Let's talk about some Overworld themes. Welcome to Music Arcade. Hello everyone, I'm Galen, the sound guy Firestone.
I'm Ranakel.
And I'm Eddie, proud owner of the loudest dog in the West.
Your dog,
He's going. He's going.
Those get to be left in.
Me.
You even called that the joke would happen. You called it.
He heard me.
He did. He did indeed. So today, let's start with the dog for a second. So last episode, I had to edit a lot of the dog out, and I had to leave a lot of the dog in. Your dog is loud, dude.
Yeah, he seems to agree. He's agreeing with you. He's 6 months old, so bear with us, folks. He's in that phase where he's very loud.
I mean, normally I would try not to have that sort of sound on my on a podcast I'm running. I lock my cat, who is very loud and very affectionate, out of the office when I do this. She's not loud enough to get through the door, however. Unfortunately, it sounds like Eddie's is.
Yeah, a lot of dogs tend to be a bit louder than cats when they're barking, so that happens. And while Galen is very, very good at editing out the extremely high amount of bikers that pass by my window, he's not a miracle worker. The barking does come across sometimes.
Yeah, I could spend hours on end EQing it, but that's like I would spend more time EQing that than I would on any other edit function in the entire week. So, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I have a limit to what I'm willing to do without pay.
It's all bikers and barkers out there.
It really seems to be, yes. So I do apologize for the temporary lapse in, if not audio quality, then at the very least in audio discipline, and there's not a whole lot we can do about that, so sorry.
We are trying to train him. He's just he's a fast learner, but as far as barking goes, then he's a bit of a slow learner, sadly.
Yeah. And, alright, now let's actually talk about our topic, Overworlds. This was kind of an interesting exercise. There were a couple that I almost picked that I made jokes out of, and one that Ran and I both made a joke out of that didn't end up making the cut for this episode, but, generally speaking, let's talk about what defines an overworld in this instance.
It's honestly a vague topic outside of one accepted clear-cut core of, yes, that's an overworld theme, and that's the map parts of JRPGs, the explorable map parts where you can get your random encounters and everything. That's, I would say, the core of the overworld theme identity. And then it also exists somewhere around there, somewhere in the area of traversal, somewhere in the area of zooming out of the world. And it's interesting to explore something that's common to video games, unique to video games, but also that is initially unique to a genre, but not necessarily locked into it.
Honestly, all I have to say about it today is that during our Halloween special, I could go on for hours describing what I think goth was. This time, all I have to say about overworld themes is that I know that's a word that will trip me a lot in speaking, because overworld is a mouthful for me for some reason, and that's the entirety of my opinion on it.
Now, I actually made the argument that Bionic Commando's level select was an overworld. That song didn't make the cut, but I'm like, but it's an overhead map. You have to traverse and avoid encounters and occasionally get into encounters over the course of this map screen. And I'm like, my brain is telling me this is an actual overworld. I think this is an actual overworld, right?
It's certainly got more gameplay than an average level select.
Right. So
I'd say it counts.
So yeah, this is kind of a mutable term, and I feel like we did stretch the definition at a couple points, but I think in some cool ways that I actually appreciate in no small way. But we may as well start with the control group, let's say, with a good old-fashioned JRPG section. Rana, take it away.
We're the Mythbusters now. We have a control group first.
As well we should.
It's less of a control group, and it's more what I would call, honestly, the gold standards as far as chill JRPG map themes are concerned. That is Final Fantasy VIII's Blue Fields, which is, well, a map theme when you're on foot, and there's this wide world, and this enormous building is like only twice the size of your character.
I have always really liked this theme. I've always really liked Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack. In fact, it's my favorite overall Final Fantasy soundtrack. And it says a lot about what I think about 14, that a lot of my favorite songs in 14 soundtrack are remixes of 8. So that kind of makes me go, wait a minute, is it the 14 part I like or the 8 part that I like? So, and in fact, this song shows up in 14 in a very cool sequence in Shadowbringers. I was hoping we get a version of that, but apparently, Rana, you said there was only, like, on YouTube, only 30-minute extended versions.
Yeah, and I think the FF14 one was there, but I thought the original might as well be used there because
it holds up.
It just works. It holds up.
Yeah, it's not
the MIDI
like...
version holds up a bit less, of course, but that's a whole other can of worms.
We will be talking about another one later that I don't think holds up as well. But for now, let's talk about this one. I like the vibe of this one. I always have. I like the plucked strings. I like the use of synths and bells. It's a very Uematsu song, obviously. It's got all of his kind of like earmarks there, but it just sounds so nice.
The soft woods as well.
Yeah.
It's like if you had a Uematsu bingo, you would have won the prize with this track alone.
Yeah, you really kind of would have. At the very least, you'd be pretty much 4 out of 5 on account of the bells and the bells and the plucks.
I think the main thing it's missing from the Uematsu bingo is it doesn't have a vocal performance that breaks the boundaries of what the hardware could do.
Right.
That was very Uematsu.
Yeah. This was definitely more traditional, but it doesn't really need to be more than that. It's just, it needs to be, the world. It's this sweeping kind of... As Rana said, it's just chill. It's almost too chill. I think if my one complaint about this is it doesn't seem to me, at least, to have the same rising tension that FF7's Overworld did.
I think it has its place, not by itself, but in a way, you need a chill world theme to contrast with the intensity of the battle theme you occasionally hear interrupted that.
I mean, yes. Yes, Don't Be Afraid is definitely a standout when it comes to regular battle themes.
I am kind of on the camp of this might be a little too chill for what it's been used. It almost feels like it belongs in one of those crafting survival games like Valheim, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Or Minecraft. It would fit really well with that sort of calm vibe where you're just gathering resources and building things up. It is a bit weird for a more story-heavy game in a way, though I wouldn't say it's bad.
It is,
honestly,
but I've actually got a comment on there. Rana, you first.
Me too. You just blown my mind right now.
Yeah.
Because, that's...
I think we're about to have the same comment too.
That it's the JRPG where instead of earning your money through loot, you have a salary.
Uh-huh. No, I was thinking the other thing that you do on the Overworld map.
Draw,
where you go around and you collect magic.
Yeah, you gather your money by hanging out, you gather your magic by poking at random spots. It's all very exploratory anyway.
It is. So I think Eddie kind of inadvertently hit the nail on the head there.
As he is wont to do.
Hooray for me having correct opinions on games I've never played.
Hey, that's at least 90% of internet discourse.
You're not wrong. Including a lot of this game, including a lot of this podcast, because I haven't played a good half of the songs that are on here. Actually, that's a lie. This is one of the rare episodes where I played most of them.
I mean, we can go back to the Final Fantasy XIV concert and talk about what I was doing that episode.
It always comes back around to that episode. I still think that I said it last episode, and I will say it again. I still think it's one of our highlights. I would love to do something that kind of big and crazy again.
Ironically, for a game that I've never played, it is one of my favorite episodes as well.
But now we're just back on last week, so let's stick with this one. How about that for a plan?
Yeah, one last note that comes to mind regarding this song is that as an overworld theme, it has to express the nature and the situation of the world in a way.
Right.
And what's interesting with this song is that it's neither fantasy nor sci-fi. It's kind of intemporal like that, which works for this game.
Yeah.
I think it... I'm not sure how much I agree with the it's not fantasy, though I do think it's less fantasy and more dreamlike.
Which
yes,
also kind of fits into the game with how Guardian Forces work, so... Yeah, I can hear that. Man, I'm really kind of getting a new appreciation for this song with Eddie's commentary continually like, this sounds like X, and I'm like, wait, that actually ties things in.
Yeah, it's weird how it appears to be pretty neutral, generic almost, and yet it reflects its game in many ways.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that I did mention on our 1 year anniversary that we are Oracle, so here we are.
Yep.
My Oracle powers strike again.
But I imagine that if, say, you wanted to impart more of a sense of adventure, you would go for something more similar to, say, a track from Lufia.
So,
take it away.
This was one of my, instant picks, and my other instant pick is going to be later on in the show, but this was the one that I'm like, this is kind of the quintessential, overworld for me. It's just such a standard, basic overworld, and that is a song called Northland, otherwise sometimes called The Earth, from Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals, and then later the remake, Curse of the Sinistrals, which literally didn't bother changing anything of the soundtrack except the orchestrations, which kind of shows how good the soundtrack is. Literally, not one note has changed, just the quality of the instruments. To the point where I'm pretty sure the arranger, Ryo Nagamatsu, who we talk about a shocking amount on this show. Sorry, not Ryo Nagamatsu, Ryo Yamazaki. Wrong one. This is the same one that did Link to the Past, or sorry, not Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening, and then also did songs on FF13. Like, we talk about this guy a lot.
He does good work.
Yeah, does very good work. Like, this song in particular, it's got that sense of, like, it's almost in that Chrono Cross realm of just that sense of sailing around the world, finding things to beat up and adventures to have. It's got the big...
It's very breezy like that.
It's very breezy. It's got the big woodwind section.
The flutes do a lot for that.
Yeah, the flute does a lot of work. It really kind of nails the feeling of that world as well in a lot of ways. How do I put this into words? It's this grand sense of, hey, here's this monster hunter who gets embroiled into this, I guess, super monster god things coming to pick a fight with the world.
Although it feels like the threat isn't really present in the overworld theme.
It isn't.
I imagine they're way more present in a lot of the more threatening story beats and themes in this game. But as far as the overworld goes, it's, like I've said for the transition, the sense of adventure and the sense of wonder that prevails.
Yeah, exactly. Lufia 2 always struck me as kind of a standout in the early Super Nintendo JRPG field. In part, like, yes, while its story can be very generic, it's also very tragic, but you don't get that impression from this either. And in fact, probably my biggest complaint about the remake was changing the ending, which then comes back around and is like, oh, this song now works again completely.
Funny how that goes.
Yeah, right? I don't know, it's what happens... Lufia 2 is what happens when you take a distant prologue to the first game and turn it into a whole game. And it worked so beautifully well, I don't know where to begin. And the music is a big part of that, because it really creates this sense of wonder and adventure. And yeah, Northland is a great example of that, and a great example of an overworld theme done very right. It's in there with, like, the early Breath of Fire games, or FF4. It's in that same camp, where it's just like, oh, this is all big and out there. Also, this game is not by Square. This is by Natsume, I want to say?
Natsume, yes.
Yeah.
Natsume.
I believe they also published at least the first set of Harvest Moon games.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of love for this one, for this song. I again, it's just sort of it's a control group. This is an overworld theme. This is what I think of when I think overworld theme. One of a few songs. So, there you go.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for a song that when you think of a situation, a perspective, a zoom level, if you will, you think of that song.
Right. As you like putting it, overworld.mp3. In my case,
exactly.
that may be kind of... In my case, that may be kind of literal, because I probably had it listed as overworld.mp3 once upon a time, ages ago, on my old computer.
That sounds about right.
On that subject, let's go ahead and pass it off to Edie, because you have another kind of a similar kind of vibe to yours, I gotta be honest.
You're pretty much from Suikoden Terkreis, whatever, who knows how to pronounce it. It's a song called To the World, and I have no idea who composed this one. The game has like half a dozen composers. I have no idea who worked on this track. But Suikoden's a franchise where the overworld themes are very similar to one another. We were even talking about this in pre-production earlier. They generally have a similar cadence. I think you could even see some sort of similar chord progression among at least a few of those themes. And then comes Terkreis, which is ostensibly not part of the main series, but it's the only other game in the franchise released in the West. So for us, it kind of is part of the main series because it's what we have.
Wait.
And go on.
No, we got other Suikoden games here.
I think the only other one we got that wasn't part of the main series was Tactics.
Oh, that wasn't part of the main series. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. I misunderstood what you meant. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's ostensibly not part of the main series. It's a side game, but the last game was on the PS2 years ago. We are not getting a Suikoden 6. Are you sure this isn't a sequel? I think it is. At any rate,
Suikoden 5 was a prequel, so the sequel already exists, and it's called Suikoden. Technically.
Thanks for your input, I guess.
Wow, okay. I'll shut up then.
At any rate, Terkreis is a weird game. I find it a bit fun, even though it eschews some of the main mechanics of the franchise. But similarly, its overworld theme also has a lot of similarities with the rest of the franchise in that it's very focused on a sense of adventure, and we're going to have fun and we're going to see great things and whatnot. But it's got a different vibe to it. It's more energetic, I'd say, to the point where I'm kind of reminded of songs that you would hear in old Western serials, like stuff like Lone Ranger and Rawhide.
Okay.
I can picture like people in horseback riding along towards adventure or something as the rhythm section kicks in. And it's pretty much a blueprint for more adventure-focused overworld themes. Like we have Final Fantasy VIII as the more peaceful one. We have Lufia 2 as a sort of a middle ground where there is some danger, but it is in the overworld. And then we have this one, which is just we are going on an adventure. Whether you like it or not, you're coming along with us.
Yep.
It's the other main archetype of overworld themes, I'd say.
Yeah, this one's got a lot of energy to it. I like this one quite a bit. It's definitely got a strong beat line, a strong string section. I don't really have too much of a comment on it mechanically, as unfortunately I did not play this one, but it's got like, unfortunately I found myself in a situation where I try to think about the song's beat and I immediately go back to a dungeon theme from Lufia 2, which we were just talking about. I'm just like, no, get out of there. We just got done talking about that game. Let's talk about this one now.
Well, funny you mentioned that, because I hear the beginning and it's almost note for note similar to another theme. This one goes da 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 da, and if you change it just a little bit, you have da 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 da, which is the beginning of the Chocobo Porter theme from FF14.
Oh no!
It always comes back to Final Fantasy XIV in this podcast.
I mean, it's got an absolutely gigantoid soundtrack, but I actually avoided it. Like, okay, I hit a quick look behind the curtain. Rana and I got into a micro, discussion off stream, and I tried to force the discussion by throwing an FF14 song out, and then he refused, well, not refused, but he wouldn't take the bait, so I ended up pulling the song and replacing it with a better one that also was based on a Rana comment, that this one was less argumentative, so to speak.
I'm just gonna throw this out. Once we open a Patreon campaign, we should make one of the goals, one of the patron goals, where once we reach a certain amount of people, we pay a Final Fantasy XIV subscription for me, because we always end up talking about Final Fantasy XIV in this thing.
You may as well learn what we're talking about. Sure.
It's
Sure.
for research purposes. We swear.
No, I mean, honestly, in this show, that's not actually wrong.
It just so happens that we have fun while researching.
Part of why I'm doing this show in the first place.
Yeah. Now I have the Chocobo theme stuck in my head. Damn it! How dare you, Rana? I'm like one guy on the planet who does not like the Chocobo theme very much. And I think it has more to do with the fact that it's been drilled into my skull as opposed to actually disliking it as a song.
That makes it two of us at least, then.
I guess that's what happens when you take a theme and remix it 15,000 times in the series.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. It even showed up in a technically non-Final Fantasy game, even though that was when Mana was still a spin-off of Final Fantasy instead of its own thing, and that's Adventure of Mana, because there was a Chocobo in that, and that song came up, and I'm just like, it won't stop haunting me. God, I don't understand why there hasn't been a Steam release of Adventure of Mana. I'm sorry, this is probably getting cut, but like, Adventure of Mana was a incredible remake of the Game Boy game known in the States as Final Fantasy Adventure, though that was a deliberate rebranding in order to, drag in Final Fantasy fans. The very first Mana game, essentially. And it only came out on iOS and Vita.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I'm just like, can we get a Steam release of this so I can play that again? Because, like, I want to show off how cool this game is.
What's the original name?
The original name in the West was Final Fantasy Adventure. I cannot stress this enough. This is not an actual Final Fantasy game.
I mean the actual translation of the Japanese name.
Seiken Densetsu something.
Just Seiken Densetsu.
Just Seiken Densetsu? I thought that was Secret of Mana.
No, Secret of Mana is Seiken Densetsu 2.
Okay, then.
Because there's 3 games in the franchise on Steam. There's Secret of Mana, there's what's the other name? Tales of Mana?
Trial.
And Trials of Mana. And
and Legend of Mana.
Yeah, none of those are it. Adventure of Mana is the one. It also got a bad remake on the DS or something called Sword of Mana. That wasn't so good. But then they did like a perfect remake for iOS and Vita, and unfortunately like we never got that on another platform, and that still kills me. That's up there with Final Fantasy Tactics on like, why isn't this on PC? People need to experience this.
Yeah, especially since that remake got highly praise and got them to remake also Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana.
Yeah. And the fact that it came out on two,
one of them,
not really console friendly.
Being good.
Yeah,
kind of brought a new life to the franchise, really, because the Secret of Mana franchise was kind of just not entirely dead, but it was
definitely stagnating,
alive. Yeah.
Damn it! I have to add a song. I think none of this is getting cut because I think I need to add Eternal Battlefield, don't I?
It's your call.
Okay, so now that we've gone off on a tangent, we may as well make ourselves useful. I'm going to talk about the Overworld, or in this case, the main field theme of this game. Now, this game doesn't play like an RPG. This one's more of a top-down Zelda-like. Just with more focus on combat than, say, puzzle solving. And
it's kind of a hack and slash.
Yeah, it's very hack and slashy. as I said, gameplay-wise, it reminds me probably the most of Link to the Past. Just, again, with the focus on have a bunch of different weapons and things they do instead of a bunch of different tools for puzzle solving that can be used as weapons. Man, this song is good. So, yeah, we just went off on this whole thing about Adventure of Mana. Let's listen to the OST for a second. Originally composed by great Kenji Ito. And now, I don't know who did the remix of this one, unfortunately. But, man, Endless Battlefield just sounds great.
That track sounds less like an overworld theme to me and more like a main theme.
To me, it kind of sounds like a song you'd hear in like the final room of the final dungeon as you're approaching the final boss, to be honest.
Yeah.
'Cause it's got that energy I was mentioning of recording, that it kind of reminds me of Bloodstained. Like, I can picture a Belmont walking to this.
Yeah, well, I mean, a chain flail is one of the weapons you can get in the game, so you can kind of fake that. Yeah, no, I get that. This is the first overworld theme of this game, by the way. There's a second one that goes even harder.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Man, so this is actually a really cool remix. This started life as this 8-bit Game Boy game, this original old-school Game Boy brick. And then they just turned it into this big, angry rock song, which kind of lets you know how dire things are right from the get. Which I kind of like about this game, Adventure of Mana, is that it doesn't really pull your punches. You don't start as a guy who is some random hero. No, you start as a gladiator slave who has to fight his way out and nearly dies in the first 2 minutes of the game and barely survives and has to fight his way back to beat the so-called Dark Lord. That's
hardcore.
Yeah, and the music kind of reflects that. You're going around this incredibly dangerous world with this incredibly tragic story.
It's like that overworld is an endless battlefield.
Yes. So now
you
mentioned it sounds like a
description for.
You said it sounds like a main theme instead of an overworld theme. I'm going to need you to kind of explain that if you don't mind, because I'm not sure what you meant.
Well, there's the main line of the melody that's very present, that's very distinct, sticks in your head, and it has this kind of strong identity that's less contemplative than most of the overworld themes we've covered in the first section so far. Even the more adventurous one, this one feels really like it's trying to essentially introduce what the whole game is going to be.
I can kind of picture it. I'm thinking right now of the Nintendo DS Castlevanias and their animated intros. I can think of it like as being the soundtrack to such an intro animation.
Yeah. Let me tell you, this remix in particular, I was not expecting the guitar to come in. Like, again, when you're dealing with the original Game Boy original, obviously there's no guitar, but this one, I see what you mean about how it's kind of a main theme and trying to sell the identity of it. That guitar is going on this song, along with the strings and along with the main line. I remain kind of very shocked. Oh, and there's an additional remix that's exclusive to the soundtrack that's even more guitar heavy. Like, that one doesn't appear in the game. This one's actually in the game. But there's like an Endless Battlefield metal version on the soundtrack. That's just... They were not messing around on this song.
Someone at Square really likes their guitars.
Yeah, I need to figure out who the arranger of this thing is. That may be part of Rana's job for research, but I would love to know who the arranger is, because they did an excellent job.
I thought you were gonna say that you need to meet the arranger of this track, because that really feels like a Galen thing to talk to a guy because of the guitars.
Yes,
how hard they go.
Yes, but also, like, I don't speak Japanese, so I'm not really sure I would have much to say. I would have to hope they speak some English, and that may be an empty one.
It would probably involve a lot of arigatos and bowing.
I would need to hire a translator. Yeah. I was not expecting to talk about Adventure Mana today at all. I was going to stick with 2 actual JRPG overworld themes and then do the weirdo kind of Zelda-like field theme later, but we started talking about this, and then I'm like, you know what, let's make use of it. And this is a good one to show off, because this game and the soundtrack does not get enough love. It's so, like, obscure for the worst possible reasons. If this had come out on Steam, it probably could have been a pretty big hit, and I hope it finally does one day. Saying that again about Square games. Frickin', can we get Tactics on Steam, please, finally? Anyway, moving on. Hi.
We don't go on tangents. We just have happy little breakthroughs.
Okay. And you called me Bob Ross last time around. Thanks, dude.
Those are our oracle moments. That's when we start talking about stuff that ends up becoming reality. Be positive.
I'm good with that.
Be optimistic.
I'm good with that.
Adventures of Mana Steam port confirmed?
Oh, I would love that. It's been like 8 years, so it's awfully late, but I would love that.
Do you know what I love? The Veldt theme from Final Fantasy VI.
Nice segue.
On the subject of Steam ports, because we're getting the FF6 Pixel version not too long ago.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
There you go.
And apparently, if the previous Final Fantasy games from the Pixel Remaster collections are any indication, the music tracks that are remixed are very good.
Nice. I still have not gotten into the Pixel stuff yet. I really need to. So, fun fact, back in the original FF6 version, I never actually liked the Veldt music that much. It kind of bothered me. And I found this one bizarre section of the overworld near the Veldt in the World of Balance that you could only acquire by airship that was 2 tiles long that acted like the Veldt, had the music of the regular overworld.
Oh.
And it was this weirdly coded spot, like just a little northwest, I think, tucked into a mountain range, 2 tiles long. It was like, not tucked into a mountain range, tucked into like half mountain range, half river, that I think was just coded Veldt, despite having the music coding of Terra's theme. So that one always made me laugh that I could do that. And I spent most of my Veldt grinding there.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm a bit flabbergasted. Things in FF6 that are weirdly coded?
Yes, that was a very glitchy game originally. You're not wrong.
One of their stats literally doesn't work on another, do something another stat should do.
Uh-huh. Yeah. For all of my love of FF6, let's be honest, that game was kind of a minor miracle that it functioned as well as it did despite its problems.
Yeah.
Back in the original Super Nintendo release, blind did absolutely nothing, so it just put some cool looking like goggles on your character sprite.
It's style points.
Style points. Now I've kind of come around on this song since then, and this remix is actually a really cool remix of the song.
Yeah, I really like that remix. I think it's by the one whose YouTube channel that that track is, who apparently remixed the rest of the FF6 soundtrack. And yeah, it's just very similar in its pace to the original, just with a more punchier orchestration.
Yeah.
Which I really like. Even though the original has nothing to envy to that, because the original is also very punchy. Like, as far as hooks go, going dum 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 dum.
It gets to you
It's
quick.
a strong
yeah.
opening. Yeah.
I guess my
And
problem
it's
with the
important.
original version, one of the problems is it's really repetitive, because that loop is only about, 45 seconds long, and it just keeps repeating ad infinitum.
Yeah, and not only that, I think one of the main reasons why it feels so repetitive is that the music continues during the battle.
Right.
So there's no interaction, you just had that loop. That can indeed get to your head.
Yes.
That does sound less than ideal from the perspective of someone who hasn't played the game.
But I will definitely say that it's important that this theme is so distinct, because ultimately you're still in the same overworld as the rest of the map. You're still having the same perspective, the same background. If the music wasn't so distinct, the Veldt would feel like any other part of the world. It's, for a lot of it, that music, perhaps even more than the unique gameplay elements of that part of the world, that gives it this kind of unique, wilder texture to it.
Yeah. Yeah, this remix really does some good work with this song. I need to track down more of the stuff, because the main, FF6 traditional reorchestration that I found have been by a guy named Sean Sherfa. I cannot pronounce this dude's last name. Okay arranger, but they have a specific style that kind of bothers me, and I don't really like listening to their stuff so much.
I don't have any specific examples right in front of me, but most of the Veldt arrangements or remixes that I've encountered kind of seem to want to calm it down, tell it to chill, and in a way not tell it to play to its strengths.
Yeah, this is not a song that works chill. This isn't a chill song.
It's the Veldt. It's wild. It's savage.
Yeah.
If you want something that's savage and chill, you take Ghost theme.
Yeah. Yeah, that's accurate, but that's not an overworld.
Very much.
Yeah, the Veldt, it's a weird way to go on this one. It's not a weird way to go. It's the exact opposite of a weird way to go. What am I talking about? Trying to make this chill would be a weird way to go. Why did I say that? What is wrong with my brain today? Sorry. Hi, I'm awake. I like the way the drums are presented in this one. Not that that was much of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, the drums are extremely important. They're more than just the background and the pace.
Yeah. They're part of the texture, and I always like it when drums get used in that way. When drums get used as an instrument and not just as a beat keeping. You have a lot of cases where the drums are just sort of there and kind of perfunctory. But I mean,
that is not one of those cases.
No. And especially 80s pop songs, some of the most famous involve crazy drum solos. So even if those drum solos or fills are just 4 seconds long, you're like, oh, that stands out in your mind. So in a case like this, when the drums get used as part of the tapestry in a very real and distinct way, that always makes me happy. I like hearing that, and this one makes use of that very well.
And now I have In the Air Tonight stuck in my head.
That was exactly what I was referencing, yes.
Oh, I was thinking of Taken Me, naturally, because of the hook, but...
Oh yeah, that would also do it. Man, and people say 808s sound bad. I don't know who's saying that. They're dumb. 808s are great.
They are. And so I think it's important that this sub area of the world has such a distinct song, because the world, even though it is one map in this game, the overworld that is, it doesn't need to be unified in all aspects. And
no,
having these kind of sticking out points that are weirder, that are unique, helps make the world feel richer and less uniform by making the music literally less uniform.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's still the same world. Now then, shall we move on to some Valheim?
This one was an unexpected pick from me, to be honest. Currently, since I'm essentially unemployed, I'm mostly going for free games and stuff that Epic gives us for free on the holidays. So Valheim was just me splurging a little bit on the holidays because I hear good things about it.
Fair enough.
And the soundtrack kind of caught me by surprise. I'll talk more about the gameplay later, since we do have the now playing segment. But as far as the song goes, the melody with I think that's a fiddle that starts a few seconds into the track, and then gives way for a clarinet. That really stuck with me. I'm not sure if that's always the track that plays in the spawn area, or if the spawn area varies and you get the track from the biome. But either way, I caught myself just cutting down trees as the sun shone down on my character, and then this clarinet melody played along, and that was just peaceful. And this, I think, now that we're getting into other meanings of overworld themes, this being an exploration game, an exploration survival crafting game, if we want to be complete about the whole thing, it does have different themes depending on the biome you're in. So this is just for the Meadows biome, I believe. But the biomes are pretty big in this game, as far as I can tell.
I've seen some gameplay of some truly gigantic forests.
Yeah.
I have to ask, given that I haven't played the game, is the music constantly present, or are there stretches of silence with occasional music happening in bursts?
As far as I've played, I haven't noticed any moment where there is no music. Though it does change to more ambience focused tracks on occasion, especially at night. But I don't believe I've come across a moment where there was absolutely no music. This was just one of the more melody heavy ones. There are some that are more ambience heavy. It varies a lot in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, the melody, especially the clarinet part of the melody in this track in particular, which is called "The Meadows - a Place to Rest," it really stuck with me. It really just I find it beautiful, to be honest. There's no other word for me.
I get it.
It's very, very peaceful, very chill, and very pretty.
I found myself with an interesting thought when listening to this one. And that was, I was actually reminded of the Skyrim concert that we talked about a few episodes ago. And found myself...
figured you would be.
Yeah, and I found myself going, wow, I like this better than just about anything in that concert. And I don't know if it's... I'm coming to the conclusion that, you know, I mentioned this at the time, but now hearing comparisons to similar types of music by different composers that just sound better, I'm starting to think I just don't like Jeremy Soule all that much. Like, just objectively, like, I just don't like, well, objectively, just without any other factors, I think I just don't like his music all that much, because this sounds like the kind of thing he would do, but much more interesting and engaging.
With more soul in it, if you will.
Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha.
You're too kind.
Even as someone who does enjoy a lot of the songs by Jeremy Soule, I get it. I really do get it. And I'd say that there's a good reason why it appears like Bethesda swapped Jeremy Soule for Inon Zur as their main composer right now.
Yeah.
Because Inon Zur essentially is a better Jeremy Soule, even to me.
I'm actually not sure I would say that necessarily, but I mean, definitely Inon Zur is, to me, a more interesting composer. Who composed Valheim? Do we have that information?
We do. It's Patrik Jarlestam, I believe it's pronounced.
Okay. This guy is, I mean, this is the only song by him I've heard, like, outside of gameplay footage, where I wasn't really paying attention to that. I was paying attention to Alfredo and Michael being ding-dongs. So, trying to get a sense of what to do there is a little different, but, I do like this quite a bit. I like how it sounds. I like its use of strings. I've been saying that a lot today. Is that a thing? Do all overworlds have to have strings? Is that, like, part of it?
Seems
That's
like we're learning that today.
Apparently. Man, this is nice. It's got a...
I guess strings are a natural companion to travel.
That makes sense.
I mean, the Vikings did travel always with a lyre.
No, you know what? Lufia didn't have strings. I mean, it has like a little bit of guitar in the background, but you can probably replace that with another instrument and not miss too much. The main strum of that one is the flute. The main thrust of that one's the flute.
And of course, the main thrust of the Veldt is the drums.
Yes. But that one still has that low string section in the melody line.
Yes.
So that one's a little harder to take out and replace. Maybe with like horns or something, but that would just sound weird. I don't know, you could do like a shofar kind of thing, like a ram horn.
Yeah, I could see that more.
Okay, this is turning into a completely different discussion than I was hoping for, so let me get back on topic here now that I'm going into a range of topics.
Welcome to Tangent Arcade.
Let's plan a Veldt range.
Oh god, guys. Alright, okay, I gotta stop being part of the problem here. No, I'm a sucker for a good string section. I'm a sucker for a good string section in a lot of ways. There's that viola in the beginning as well. There is a viola in here. And I like use of viola. Viola is a big fat violin, and that's the shortest and most layman's way of putting it. And I've always liked the sound of that instrument. It's basically the midline between a violin and a cello. And it's got this like rich sound to it that I've just always gravitated towards.
Yeah, I also like a lot how the transitions between what is the instrument being played as a solo is, because you get, I think there's like 3 different sections, one with the viola or maybe a fiddle, but probably a viola. Then you get to the clarinet and then back to the viola, and the transitions work really really well. Like you don't see a cut, let's say. It feels natural.
Now I didn't.
It feels peaceful.
I didn't hear a fiddle in there. A fiddle is to a violin what a ukulele is to a guitar. It's absolutely its own instrument, but it's largely considered a miniature, high-pitched version of the other thing.
I think I'm thinking more of a medieval fiddle, but either way, probably a viola. I suck at capturing the timbre of both instruments.
That's fair.
I understand my piano, I understand my clarinet, and that's it.
Honestly, I've seen a fiddle player at a charity marathon a few weeks ago, and the topic of the difference between fiddle and violin came up to on the table, and his answer to what's the difference between the two of them was basically a big shrug.
That's
fair.
Not actually fair at all, but okay. I don't think that's fair in the least. Yeah, no, fiddles are also used very differently, generally speaking, in orchestrations like this. So, not that you can't use it in weird ways. I've heard a harp go through distortion pedals before. That was pretty cool.
Whoa.
So, like, but generally,
instinctively, the fiddle belongs to the docksides or the tavern.
Yeah, the fiddle. Or westerns. You hear fiddle a lot in westerns, especially if you want that high-pitched, that high-pitched string, like just rampant trilling. You almost always use a fiddle for that.
Yeah.
Or just a good old-fashioned hoedown. Fiddle is great in bluegrass. That's not even a joke.
And bluegrass is great. Just
right?
Throwing it out there.
So yeah, no, I think your performer may have been a little underinformed. Because there's absolutely a clear difference between them. Certainly in their use as an orchestration, but even just as instruments, there's differences. And with that, let's move on to someone we talk about way too often on this show. And I think that has to do with how prolific he is, as opposed to any real, affection for the guy, I want to say. Don't get me wrong, I like this guy's work a lot, especially this song, but man, Sky Gate from Valkyrie Profile is a good song. You want to talk about not having strings? This one's 100% synth, and it's just great.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you like synths then? Here's some synths.
Yeah, this one always struck me as such a complete departure from what I was used to for Overworld or map themes. This one's kind of like Adventure of Mana because it just goes hard and doesn't stop, though not as hard. This one's definitely more tense than it is angry.
I disagree. I think that if you take the whole soundtrack into account and how tense and oppressive most of the themes for the dungeons, the caves, even the safe havens like enormous cathedrals from other worlds, they all feel like they're bearing down on you with droning, drumming noises, texturing the sounds, and then you have this one which feels comparatively not light, but open.
It definitely feels open compared to the dungeons. You're right.
It's as if most of the other tracks of this soundtrack go downwards, and this one goes upwards, which makes sense because it's another world you only traverse by flying.
Yeah. One of the big differences between Valkyrie Profile and a lot of other games is that this one, you're playing as a goddess, so she's got some oomph to her. She's not really a regular, slave. And this is technically the second game I picked that isn't Square Enix because this predates Square. This is just an Enix game. This predates the merger. I mean, now it's Square Enix, but it wasn't at the time, so I'm going to take that as I'm not relying on Square Enix entirely here.
It's Tri-Ace.
It is Tri-Ace, yeah.
Being technically correct is the best way of being correct.
Isn't it just? I mean, look, I talk about Square so much because they do so much good music. What do you want from me? This is definitely there with Dark Souls as one of Motoi Sakuraba's most influential soundtracks. Like, This one is so unique for the time, and even then it's still copied a lot. Largely by him. Let's just be realistic here. He does tend to retread his own material quite a bit.
Yes. 100%, absolutely.
Yes. For better or worse.
Yes.
I don't know. I definitely agree that this sounds more open, but there's still that underlying just incredible tension under it. Like, this is not a chill song in the least, and I think it's disingenuous to call it that, even if it is chill, quote-unquote, by comparison to the rest of the soundtrack, that is this progressive, just noise machine just thrown at you from every angle that all of the things are happening now.
I mean, for all the openness and the flying you do that we talked about, it is a game where you get in the map by flying above the troubles of the mortal world, having a number of days before the end of the world, and seeking the brave soul of somebody who is about to die in a horribly tragic way.
Yeah.
That's the main gameplay loop.
Pretty much.
So the tension is there for a reason.
A thing that came to my mind as someone who hasn't played the game yet, when I was listening to it, is that I had a similar, I got a similar vibe, just this track goes way harder, but a similar vibe to Corridors of Time from Chrono Trigger, in that it had a sort of ethereal quality to it, but at the same time a very strong underlying sense of unease, a bit of a foreboding thing. Might have been the synth at the intro, where it starts very softly and has those kind of bell-like sounds, which are similar to the ones from Corridors of Time. Maybe it was that. But then the Valkyrie Profile track just goes ham on the synth. It gets much harder.
I think the issue there is actually the version I posted.
Yeah, I was going to say,
because that one's actually combined with another song.
2 tracks.
Yeah.
I've mentioned Seeking the Souls of the Future Dead. Basically, the first part, the calmer part, the more mystical part, is when you close your eyes, spread your ears, and listen, with the whole world around you disappearing. And then you fly over it.
That's fair. That would explain things a little bit. That intro was very similar to me, at least in its general vibe. But the main body of the track really, it's pretty much using a synth as if it was a guitar.
Yes, which is something that Mr. Progressive Rock Motoi Sakuraba does very often.
I can't imagine why.
Anyway, I'm happy we talked about my single favorite JRPG and that I wasn't even the one who brought it up.
You kind of were. You made a comment about it. I'm like, oh, no, that's actually a really good song to use. Let's talk about this because it's so different than anything else we're talking about.
One of us took the other's bait.
I'm okay with that. Hey, the original topic we were going to have for this particular section was also me taking your bait, and then you refusing to take mine back, and then it was like, well, there's no point to this song.
That's what I said. One of us took the other's bait.
Yeah.
Now I'm just thinking of that Mad Max meme of him pointing up and going, nope, that's bait.
Oh, that was such a good movie. You want to talk about good music in a movie? That one was good music in a movie. But honestly, if the bait leads us to talking about Valkyrie Profile, I'm okay with it. I would love a third real Valkyrie Profile game. Like, we've had 2 spin-offs now, and one of them was a gacha game that kind of worked and really didn't in other ways.
That had a way better story than it had any way to be.
Yeah, but it was still just a horribly
Yes. Horrible game.
Yeah, just a
I think
horribly predatory gacha.
Every time you say there were a lot of spin-off games and one of them was a gacha game, that's a slump moment. That's when everyone gets sad.
Yeah. I will admit that that gacha game had a better story and a way better soundtrack than it had a right to. A lot of them were remixes of this exact soundtrack. Man, their version of Mission to Deep Space was good in that game. And that also had a very good version of Sky Gate somewhere built in there, I think. Do I remember that right, or am I crazy? I might be crazy.
I don't remember when it happens, if it happens. It is possible.
Okay. That said, we're talking about the actual song from the actual game, except totally not, because I picked a version from a remix album. So, go me. An official remix album. This is remixed by Motoi Sakuraba himself, so it's not like this is some... This is not like a situation like the Veldt song where it's remixed by a third party. The original guy got his hands back on it and was like, yeah, let's do this. Which he's done several times since.
Sometimes he even files the number off and calls it a new soundtrack.
Yes, that's a very Sakuraba thing that happens.
Yeah.
That said, this is thankfully not one of his remixes he murders with great vengeance. Sometimes he'll go a little too off the progressive deep end and end up just improvising the hell over a song and just killing it and just being like, this is now unlistenable. Good job! He did not do that this time. This remix is good. I'm not really talking about the remix, but I may as well just mention a couple words about it. I don't really have much more to add to this. Should we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. Back to you, Eddie.
That one coming up had a very interesting integration from what you talked to us about.
Yeah, this is a cool one. I like this, both the idea and the song itself.
Also, we're now entering the part of the podcast of the episode where we will discuss things that maybe aren't technically overworld themes by most people's idea of the word, but hey, it's our podcast. We make the rules here. Because we're talking about Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which, as one might have figured, doesn't really have an overworld like the previous games we've mentioned.
Honestly, it's a bit of a similar situation to Valheim as far as I'm concerned. Like, what's the overworld in an open world game?
That is fair, though Ubisoft apparently took a slightly different interpretation of that, because in this game, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, most of the time when you're just walking around, you don't really have a lot of music. But their idea when making this game, and the one that came before, Unity, was that since the entire franchise is so much about parkour and free running, then the rooftops are where the assassins are at home. So they wanted to give a lot of power to the player when you get to a rooftop. And that translated into giving you a lot of information about your surroundings when you're above the ground.
Yeah.
Especially in churches and higher buildings. And in this game in particular, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, that's where most of the music kicks in. Music that I should mention was composed by the amazing Austin Wintory. And the track we're talking about, one of those tracks that play when you are above the buildings, is Peace and I Are Strangers Grown, which is kind of operatic in a way. It's a bit short to call it an opera, but it has that operatic vibe to it. And considering this game is about a pair of twins who were born and raised as members of the Assassin's Brotherhood, I really love the title, which is what's sung in the track itself. This idea that the character you are playing as and Peace are so distant from one another. Like, you are strangers. You've grown as strangers. You've never met Peace. And I love when composers get poetic like that.
Yeah, this song really kind of hit me way harder than I thought it would. For reasons completely different. Like, the vocals are cool and all, I guess, but the thing that actually got me was, I've talked about this a few times, how cadences can kind of work. And sometimes I've argued, like, hey, wait a minute, this cadence doesn't work at all. This cadence actually is kind of interesting because about 2/3 of the way through the song, or at least the YouTube video of the song, it starts getting very intentionally dissonant, but then resolves the cadence into something really pleasing, and I'm like, that is a very good use of dissonance here. This is how dissonance is supposed to be used. There's this sense of tension, there's this sense of wrongness, and then it all kind of comes together in a way that's pleasing to the ear in the end. So...
That's very interesting what you mentioned, because that song, even though the theme is... the pace and the tone is completely different, somehow still reminded me of a theme from a city from Heroes of Might and Magic 4, where you have several factions, each with their own kind of city, and in particular the theme of the Chaos City, which also uses that kind of dissonance to reflect the identity of the chaos.
Right.
I think in this case, it's more to reflect the dark underside of London, since the game is set in Victorian London.
Right.
Because you have these beautiful churches. You have I think it's Westminster Palace. You have the House of Commons, you have Big Ben, you have all that pretty stuff, all those beautiful buildings that you climb on top of to hear this music. And then there's this dark underbelly, because the entire story of the game is about a gang war. You are creating a new gang to remove from power the gang controlled by the Templars. So there's the beauty of London during the Victorian age, and there's the darkness and violence of not only the assassin lifestyle, but in particular the gangs that are the main focus point of this game.
Right. Yeah, I can totally hear that. I can totally hear that in this. It definitely does not sound it definitely I get that impression.
Words are hard.
Words are hard. Yeah, no, I definitely get that impression from what you're talking about. It does give that sense of wonder as well as that sense of just darkness and just ick and muck, which makes a lot of sense because, you know, the dark side of London's a pretty messed up place in just about every piece of media we've seen of it. Regardless of the age.
We did mention in our Halloween special the DLC for this game, and the DLC was all about Jack the Ripper. Mm-hmm. So that was composed by someone else, not by Austin Wintory, but I think that serves as an example of the vast difference between the beauty of London and the darkness of its more poor suburbs, more poor areas.
In a lot of ways, this track is kind of like taking a step back from all the hustle and bustle and violence and just contemplate from one of the many viewpoints in the game.
Which I think is a really interesting take on the idea of an overworld, because yeah, you're in a main hub, but when you go up and above and start looking at these icons, as you said, that's where this song kicks in. which I think is a really cool kind of different modern take to the concept that I think actually works really well. I'm very complimentary of this idea, to be perfectly honest with you.
And I hope Ubisoft does it again, because after this game they went into their mythology trilogy, which didn't really have that many big buildings.
Yeah.
So here's hoping they go urban at least for one more game, so we can have this experience again, because it's really cool to climb a building and get this hit of just the size of things around you and the song to accompany that vibe.
I definitely prefer games like this. Speaking as a fan of the game The Saboteur, I definitely prefer games like this where you can mess around in cities.
I have enjoyed the mythology trilogy, especially Odyssey, but I do miss the urban aspect of the franchise.
Yeah.
Now, for something completely different, Rana has another contentious pick for this episode.
Let me just pick up a turnip out of the ground and throw it at you.
By all means.
I actually,
we need that beatbox
I
album.
actually objected to this one in the pre-production. I'm like, wait a minute. I know the title is Overworld, but this isn't an Overworld. It's a stage theme. It's a recurring stage theme, but it's a Mario Brothers stage theme.
Yeah, but when you don't have a map like in, say, Mario Bros. 3,
yeah,
in a way, traversal of the world is the Overworld. Even though it's also the gameplay. And it's recurring because there's these Overworld dungeon-like themes, but ultimately the more open and vast aspect of the Overworld, accompanied by this Overworld theme, simply dictate a pace that's different. Like you have the underground theme that's more puzzle-oriented, I'd say, and then you have this one and you just zoom in.
I mean, yes, but also, like, alright, so on the merits of the song, this one's an underrated classic, just like Super Mario 2 in general. Purists are like, it's Doki Doki Panic. I'm stopping you right there, right now. Yes, it started life as Doki Doki Panic, but it was also spearheaded by Shigeru Miyamoto. Doki Doki Panic in that particular instance was a crossover title.
I think I read even
also
that it started as Mario 2 but became Doki Doki Panic because they got a licensing deal.
Right.
Also of note, this track is in Doki Doki Panic, but it's a shorter and slightly different version of it.
Oh, really? I was not aware of that.
Yeah, the part that goes and so on from that point is Super Mario Bros. 2 exclusive.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah.
I actually really like that. That's, hey, once again, Super Mario Bros. 2 is good.
And it's something I learned just doing research and doing my due diligence in the, half an hour of research I did. And that's it being generous.
Yeah, no kidding. But no, I've always liked this. Nothing against the Lost Levels, but let's be honest. The Lost Levels was in all reality the first Kaizo game.
The Lost Levels was a standalone DLC before DLCs were a thing.
Oh my god, it really was. That's a DLC expansion is what that is.
Yeah, exactly.
Where Super Mario Bros. 2, yes, it has its weird history, but it's very much like a lot of it has migrated into the greater Mario world. But bombs are still there, Shy Guys are still there. You occasionally have situations where Peach can float, things like that.
I'd say even the music,
absolutely.
I think Mario 2 was when we really started getting into the ragtime vibe of the Mario soundtrack. And a lot of especially the 2D Mario games, have that ragtime vibe to it, even if they aren't technically using the piano as an instrument. Mario
It's one of
World
the two
comes to my mind.
vibes.
Yeah.
It's one of the two vibes, because yes, there is this ragtime vibe, although it's mostly present in athletic themes and not overworld themes, and the other is more of an almost Brazilian samba kind of vibe.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, yes, for the record, I like this song quite a bit. I like this game quite a bit. I don't think it fits an overworld by definition. I mean, it's closer than some other games because of the way the underground and puzzle segments work. But I don't know. My brain is telling me like I feel like this shouldn't count. I'm sorry, dude.
It's right there in the title.
It is right there in the title, and I kind of hate that because I'm having a really hard time. Like, I don't want to tell you, no, you can't do this. I've yet to exercise a veto power.
I have to admit, I mostly did that pick because it was a cute idea, and not because I fundamentally believe that.
Okay, all right, we're doing one of these experiments, huh? Which is funny because that was going to be my next song, which was going to be one of these experiments, except for the fact that it's literally one of my favorite game songs of all time. So,
well, experiment away on the back of a ball that goes way too fast and drifts way too hard.
We're just diving right into it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I was planning on talking about Mario Brothers 2 some more, but let's talk about it.
The transition was too good to ignore.
Fair enough. Okay, so, my plan was to actually use this comparison for this game as opposed to Adventure of Mana, which was during the episode Tangent Edition. But I'm kind of stretching the definition of overworld to include, like, field themes. When you have a central hub when you have a central large-scale hub, not like a hub room or a portal room, but like a main field that leads to the various spokes where the rest of the game lies. So, like, you have your Zelda where you're running around the whole world and getting to your dungeon sort of thing.
And it's funny because I have this mental process about how open it has to be and not simply the size of it.
Yeah.
For instance, Ocarina of Time Hyrule Field, yes, that's an overworld theme.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Super Mario 64 Peach's Castle, that's not an overworld theme.
I would call that one borderline, but I'm definitely more in agreement with you than not.
Even though it serves the same function.
I mean, I would say I have a similar vibe, which is why I explain more in detail why I picked the Assassin's Creed Syndicate track, because Valheim is very open by the nature of what the game is about. Meanwhile, Assassin's Creed Syndicate is very enclosed because you are in London. You are in a big city.
Both of them are open world games in a way.
Yes,
both are open world, but one is so enclosed that it's hard to justify a track that would play in the streets as an overworld theme. But the fact that it plays when you climb.
And also because on the ground, I think most of the soundtrack they do bring is diegetic.
I think so. Syndicate in general was very diegetic, but going back to Galen's pick before we go too off topic.
Where was I? This song was where I first actually fell in love with this game, and that is Hills of Radiant Wind, the main field theme from NieR, Gestalt, and Replicant. Notice how I put Gestalt first. There's a reason for that in my brain.
Yeah.
So, this was the first time Keiichi Okabe really blew me out of the water. Yes, the game starts with Snow and Summer, which is a truly excellent song, but I really thought that one was a one-off. I had no reason not to, really. Like, that's a very special intro sequence with a very special intro song. That was very similar in tone and vibe to Drakengard 2, which was Kavia's prior game to that point.
Yes.
But then you're playing the starting bit, you're now playing as Papa NieR, you're, about to go out into the world, and then this song starts kicking in. And the version I have here played as the live version, and we'll talk about that in particular momentarily, But you come out into the world, and it's got the tribal drums, it's got the piano, it's got that string sequence going, and you're like, oh, they're really going with the music. And then Emmy Evans' vocals comes in and completely just blew me out of the water. And that's when I realized I was really dealing with something special here. Very rarely has a song connected with me this deeply, this quickly. Like, this was instantly just, oh, I get this.
I think we have a contrast between, say, Blue Fields that's like, hey, it's an open world. Can't you see how vast it is? And this song that takes you by the shoulders, shakes you so you have a wider field of vision, and say, look at how open and beautiful everything is.
Right? Which also kind of brings me around. It's honestly kind of a similar vibe to the Lufia song in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely more pretty, which is much like Lufia. I don't want to say out of place, but it certainly doesn't really belie the sheer amount of just trauma that's going on in NieR. It's a Taro Yoko game. You can't be that surprised by this. To the points where the goats will absolutely destroy you if you're not careful.
Yeah. Goats.
Never mind the boar you just mentioned. That boar. That heckin' boar.
I'm wondering if that explains why Rana wants to punch a goat.
No.
You don't want to punch those goats unless you are very prepared for it.
If I punch those goats, they'd kick back.
Yeah. The goats in NieR will dominate you. Like, do not go into a goat fight unprepared. They aren't even a regular enemy. They're just animals. You go up against a goat, you are going to have a problem. I remember one time, I think I actually, accidentally dodge rolled into a goat, and it didn't like that. And I'm just like, well, this is how my life ends. I'll see you at the game over screen. As I run away screaming. Now, the version I put on here was even more incredible, because it was actually on a CD. Anyway, sorry, Square...
That version is sick.
Square announced yet another Blu-ray. Stop, you! Anyway, so this comes from the NieR Automata pre-release concert, NieR Music and Talk, which actually featured announcements of announcements and first looks of 2 songs from NieR Automata. But the main thrust of it was a lot of the original songs getting live, small band mixes. And this one actually has the audacity to expand upon Hills of Radiant Wind by adding a Spanish guitar at the start.
Which immediately goes for a Wild Frontier kind of vibe.
Uh-huh. Which it's perfect for the song. But then you have this...
That guitar goes hardcore. Let's just say that.
It does.
Dude's really good at it.
Oh, yeah, that guitarist is excellent. And I know the pianist on the track, or at least I believe the pianist on the track is Monaka pianist Keiko Hawashi, who has done all of the piano lead stuff in all of Monaka's stuff, as far as I can remember. We talked not too long ago about Fate Extella Link and me being surprised that Monaka had anything to do with that game. This is not one of those cases. This is an extremely Monaka song because you have the guitar, you have the drums and pianos, you have the strings, and then here comes Emmy Evans, just knocking it out of the park yet again. God, she's a good performer, and I'm so lucky to have been able to see her live before the pandemic. Even if I didn't like those mixes at all, and she only got 2 songs to do a night, it was still incredible to see her. But this song, is the closest to putting tears in my eyes that I think I've ever had during a concert situation. It's just so damn pretty. And it hits all the right notes, and the live version has just so much emotion and so much energy to it that, don't get me wrong, the studio version has that as well, but there's just something different about how that one's done.
It's wanderlust in a pocket.
It really is. I don't know. I don't have much to say about this one, but this has always been one of my big influences and one of my big just like, man, this is what game music can do kind of songs. I may have talked about this exact song before on this show. I don't care. I will talk about it again. I will gush about this until the end of time. I don't think I will ever get tired of this.
It is a
good song.
Very good track.
Yeah. NieR Gestalt and Replicant was just such a unique soundtrack. Don't get me wrong, Automata was also really good, but it was really good in a more traditional way. It definitely focused more on instruments with vocals as a secondary, or as the lead melody line, whereas this soundtrack was truly vocal primary. And I'll definitely find an excuse to talk about other songs on the soundtrack again. But this song in particular, again, it introduces you to the open world of NieR, and I do wish the gameplay kind of caught up with how good it is.
Yeah.
Because the gameplay in the original NieR Gestalt and Replicant, let's be honest, Cavia had some problems when it comes to gameplay. The combat was kind of stale and boring and never really balanced properly. But I'll be damned if the music wasn't something really, really great.
Well, on that note, let's move on to the next section, which is what we are playing this time. It's Music Arcade, now playing.
Now playing! I have nothing new to add to the pile. I'm still playing my usual games, still playing Strikers, still playing SMT5, finally got back to that, trying to finish that one up.
You did get to the final fight in Hades since our last episode.
Yes, I've gotten a few clears in Hades now.
What did you think of the second phase of the final boss's track?
Really good, rockin', really, really, really cool.
That really puts back the metal in death metal.
God. All right. Okay. All right. Sure.
I mean, yes, gods too, I guess.
Now we're gonna get a lot of comments from people who are into heavy metal who are gonna just discuss the intricacies of the different heavy metal subgenres, because there's nothing that metal fans do more than discuss metal subgenres.
You're not
wrong.
They're gonna tell you about 1,000 times how wrong you are by calling it death metal. Trust me.
And I will ignore every single one of those instances should they happen.
As well you should.
What I won't ignore, though, is now that I've finished FF7 Remake, how good some of the parts of FF7 Remake Integrate is musically.
I've only heard the one song so far, and that one song was at the concert, so unfortunately I don't have a whole lot of comments there.
The first combat theme is an amazing reprise that alone shows how much they're working to elevate the main character of that DLC. And it's working very well for that. It's very breezy, it's very lovely. It's just full of a distinct, unique energy.
Awesome.
And I will also say, as far as some of the other tracks of that expansion goes, that in the list of genres I would have expected in that game, I did not expect sellout metal to be one of them.
Sellout metal? You mean?
Yes.
Okay. Like, what does that mean?
It means metal, but it's also an advert.
Oh, actual
What?
sellout metal. Okay, that was...
Yes.
Okay. Huh.
I'm not using that if I didn't mean what I said.
Okay. I thought you were trying to make it dig it like metalcore or something, which would have made me frustrated. But no, you're actually okay. Wow. All right.
I thought it was gonna be either a joke about Five Finger Death Punch or at the quote unquote genre of butt rock. But no, go on. I'm intrigued.
Now I'm.
No, I won't go on because that would be spoilery.
Darn it.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and I made very clear that FF7 remake spoilers on this channel will not be tolerated. Sellout metal.
So I am taking it careful.
Yeah,
I do not mind getting details about it on Discord DMs.
Especially now that you actually have a PS5.
Yes, I do. I finally have a PS5. Woo! I do need to play Integrate at some point, and then deal with the terrible, terrible combat system that is FF7 remake. God, I hope Part 2 is a better battle system. God, I hope Part 2 is a better battle system, or at least ally AI that's actually vaguely intelligent. Sorry, I'm going to keep complaining about this because it keeps sucking. Anyway, moving on.
They actually make some interesting things with that.
Good, thank you. Thank you for telling me this.
I was gonna say that Rana's silence at that comment was a bit unnerving.
Which is part of why I broke it.
Anyway, I believe it's my turn to talk about what the hell I've been playing lately. And,
Tis!
Go right ahead.
Tis indeed.
Yeah, I've mostly been playing stuff that's either free or been given for free by Epic Games. So, hooray for free games. One of them was Valheim. We talked about it earlier. I enjoy the soundtrack. I think the night themes of the soundtrack are a bit too ambience heavy. They kind of get a bit... Those do get a bit boring. I've mostly playing it single player so far. I know a few people who do play the game as well that I could talk to play multiplayer. The way the times haven't fit, the schedules haven't fit very well so far, and I've just had one hell of a bad week health-wise. So maybe next week I'll play with some more people, but even playing solo, it's fun, it's relaxing. It's nice to play at night or whatever. Just building stuff up, creating your own small Viking settlement. It would be cool if it had something like the villagers from Minecraft, where you can just drag those people in and just populate a city of your own if you wanted to, but it doesn't have Valheim doesn't have NPC, so it's just you and other players and the wildlife. So I understand why some people say that playing it single player is boring. To me, it's relaxing, but maybe it might get boring over time if I do it too much. So I understand that point. Other than that, I've tried Vampire from the Epic Games giveaways.
Yep.
It's okay. The combat sucks. The soundtrack is interesting. It's basically more of what we've talked about when we brought up, not to mention this game once again in this episode, but when we brought up in the Gothic episode, the Halloween special, the Jack the Ripper DLC for Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The soundtrack to Vampire is basically more of that, with a bit of synths now and then. It's fine. It does its job. It's pleasant enough. It's dark as it should be. The gameplay is and the combat is really bad. So I've played. Let me see. Epic Games says I've played about 2 hours, a bit less than 2 hours, and that includes messing with the menus. So I haven't really gone through a lot of the story, and I'm hesitating to do that because the combat's so bad.
Yeah.
Other than that, I've touched a little bit on Godfall. Did not like the game, too repetitive. Soundtrack is generic action movie-like stuff. Nothing much to say on that one.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a seller.
Yeah, it's alright, I guess. And I've played a little bit of Deponia, the Complete Journey. It's a point-and-click game. This has a lot of creativity to it. It has a very strong identity. It is very has a very similar vibe to some of the old LucasArts point and click games, particularly the third Monkey Island.
Okay.
It's not exactly family friendly, but it has a more cartoonish vibe than even Monkey Island. I'll say that much. That aspect of it, I am a bit on the fence about. But as a whole, for people who dig point and click games and who are okay with being frustrated that they clicked on absolutely everything and then they realized that the solution to the puzzle was the most obvious one that was staring you in the face for about an hour and a half, you will enjoy Deeponi as well. So that's basically all fans of point and click games, I think. And the soundtrack didn't leave too much of an impression to me, but that's mostly because so far I haven't heard too many songs. Some screens don't have background music, and the ones that have are a bit chaotic because the game starts in a junkyard planet. So I've yet to move forward enough to listen to a more varied soundtrack. But so far, thumbs up from me, and the writing it's pretty cool. The puzzles are as frustrating as I expected from a point and click from someone who grew up with Day of the Tentacle. So
yep,
pretty cool game. And that's all that I've been playing lately.
Is that it for all of us? Are we good here?
Yeah. The only other game I've played has been more FF14, so...
And we're probably going to have a guest on to talk about that soundtrack fairly soon, with all respect to Eddie. I know he's going to love sitting through that again.
Oh boy.
And with that, I think that is all the time we have for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We always appreciate the support in this brand new year of... Well, I was about to say travels and excitement, but I think we've had way too much excitement already this year, so...
So you mean that the real overworld we're thrown in is made of complicated traversal and the occasional deep dark dungeon, huh?
Sounds like the most quintessential overworld there is, yeah.
Well, here's to a better 2022 than 2021 was.
Here's to a better 2022. Thank you guys, and we will see you next episode. Have a good one, y'all.
See ya.
See you next time.